What's up, Wackadoo Racing Channel? Welcome back. Time for a quick update on Project Hidalgo. I've been pretty busy, so let me show you what I got done over the last few days. So, I shot this video a little bit differently than normal. Typically, I try and take you guys along with me on the journey while I'm working on the project and installing things and doing things of that nature. But this time, I went ahead and I got everything done beforehand, and I'm gonna go ahead and catch you guys up on what I got done. Now, there's a couple reasons for that. A, it slows me down exponentially to try and shoot video while I'm working on the project. And in this case, I was enjoying working on the project and how much headway I was actually making in a short amount of time. So I went ahead and decided to just keep going and not slow myself down with shooting video. Secondly, on Project Hidalgo specifically, compared to our other projects, we have extremely low actual engagement from you guys. And that's normal and understandable. So square bodies, this particular body style, were run from 1973 through 1987. And two earmark years that had a lot of good data was 1975. They made 750,000 of them in 1975 alone. And by 1978, that was 1.3 million square bodies sold. And it seems like at least all those people have YouTube channels explaining how to work on square bodies. So there's no reason for me to show you all that stuff as much as update you guys on the project. Later on, when we start dropping in the caddy motor, changing things out, and working on the bed, and putting this thing to use, we're gonna do a lot more video with it, but I don't wanna wear you guys out by doing all that stuff now on stuff where you can find really good videos and how-to and tech articles on how to do this stuff, since there is a lot of information about these trucks. So let's just show you what I got done over the holiday. So the first thing you'll notice is the carpet. So let's start with that. Now, knowing that I wanted this truck to ride quietly and smoothly, I started with hitting all the areas that were really high vibration or really high heat with kill mat. Now obviously this is a tar-backed 50 mil sound deadener that also works really well for knocking out some heat. So that was layer one, and I applied that in a few places. Layer two was jute style insulation. Now this stuff is pretty thick, and it's got this foil backing that helps to try and keep some of the heat in, AC in, or heat out, AC in, either way, and helps a lot with sound killing. So this will work really well for insulating it, help the AC work better in the summer, keep the heat in the winter, that kind of thing. And finally, the carpet itself. So this is a standard tuck-in loop style carpet, but I went ahead and I paid the extra for the mass backing, which is a rubberized backing that goes on the carpet itself. Now, this one sat for a while, so it did dry up a bit, but largely it was still fairly moldable, and I was able to install it without too much trouble. This carpet did sit in a box for 3 years before I got around to installing it. So it took a while for it to start getting some of the lumps out, and it took a while to take form to the floor. Most of the spots that aren't perfectly smooth are going to be covered up with the seats, so I'm not too worried about that, but it looks great and I'm really pleased. So we already have our bolt holes laid out, so our seats can go back in, and I replaced all the sill plates with brand new ones. So now we've got this nice aluminum trim all the way around on the floor to finish off our carpet. One thing to note is in square bodies, you really have two main types of trans hump, and there's what they call a high hump and a low hump. I have a high hump, and I got a carpet for a low hump. So obviously I had to go ahead and cut around it, and I went ahead and did a wrinkle finish on this, and it looks pretty nice, but I don't know if I'm going to be keeping that in place or if I'm going to convert it to a low hump later. I'm not sure. But ultimately, we're not going to be running the stick shift anymore. We are going to convert it to a TH400. So this may or may not stay, but for now, it looks nice and clean and finishes off the carpet nicely. That brings us to the update on the stereo. So I was able to go ahead and install the 6x9s in the back that I was waiting on. These are some nice Kenwoods, and eventually those will be supplied with an amp as well. And we're going to end up eventually putting in the 12s and a secondary amp for those. So we should be running 2 amps. One for the speakers, one for the subs, but that's all going to come later. That's really not in the budget right now, so we're going to skip past that now that we know at least where the space needs to be. I also went ahead and installed these 6 inches here in the kick panels. Now, they look really nice and they're out of the way, and these are going to work out just fine for me, but I am going to replace these speakers. The ones that come in the LMC kick panel speakers are junk. They're extremely low power, and for the stereo I plan on running, they're not going to be useful. They sounded really horrible with just the standard amperage that comes out of the head unit, so I would go ahead and avoid buying those, although the actual kick panels are really nice. I also went ahead and made up an adapter plate so I could install a single DIN stereo. Now this one has a couple of outs so we can run a couple of amps, as well as phone and Bluetooth connectivity and a standard CD player instead of just the regular AM/FM radio. So that'll be a nice addition for making this a more modern driving experience, but that's not a priority now, so it's obviously not wired up. But I already checked and made sure it worked, and I'm pretty pleased with it. So later on, we'll go ahead and get that wired up and we'll have a stereo. I went ahead and repainted the lower dash in gloss black to match the door jambs. I also remade this molding. Now, obviously, this one's going to be temporary because I plan on installing AC in this truck, and there needs to be a vent there and a vent there. But these moldings are actually really expensive, and I don't need it just yet because I don't have air conditioning in the truck. Later on, I might prioritize that, but these pieces of trim are like 250 bucks, and I wasn't able to find one that I really liked that had all the necessary hardware that would make it easier later on. So I made up this temporary one out of standard wood, dyed it and blacked it the same way that I did the other ones, and stuck it in place for now. At least it looks good until I can figure out what I want to do as a more permanent solution. I might end up making this a more permanent solution, but that's to be determined later. I also, after 3 years of sitting on this thing, got to finally install my steering wheel. This beautiful 18-inch mahogany and chrome cattle skull steering wheel was something that I managed to get a really good deal on at the Pomona Car Show swap meet, and I've been waiting ever since to install it, but I knew the truck wasn't ready. Now, it's finally in, and I am obsessed with the way it looks and how good it feels in hand. Can't wait to actually drive with this thing. But it's safer in the truck than on the shelf finally, so I feel good about it. So while I was there doing everything else, I went ahead and ripped a bunch of bad wiring out from underneath the dash. The previous owner had installed is being a bit generous, had installed a bunch of extra switches and wired a bunch of things, and it was a mess. So I ended up ripping out a bunch of wire that looked something like this. So by the time I was done, I ended up ripping out a bunch of wires. A lot of it didn't go anywhere. A lot of it, unfortunately, did. And it ran to things that were completely unfused or improperly hooked up. And 2 of those big things were actually hooked up with house extension cords that he had cut the ends off. So it was a mess and a fire hazard. But the good news is I ripped all that stuff out. Everything still works in the truck, and I'm able to fire it up and move it around still. Now, later on, I'm going to rewire everything in one shot with brand new fuse panels and brand new wire so that everything's right the first time. That's why nothing's hooked up just yet. But I am going to get around to that, but knowing that this thing's not going to catch on fire due to some of his nasty wiring is also a big upshoot. Now, one of the things I'm most excited about is I finally got to install my dash cluster. Now, this is not actually the one that I had for the truck. I actually ended up buying a third one because the other one I had was also wrong. This one's technically not the right one either, but I was able to make it work. Now with that in mind, I find it laughable that nobody for the square body market makes an affordable gauge set. So I ended up buying a completely aftermarket set of gauges and making my own adapters so that I could run the 3 3/8 speedometer, which this happens to be a GPS speedometer and tachometer, as well as my other gauges here. And I went ahead, and although I had really contemplated doing all digital gauges because it would have looked really cleanly and saved me a lot of energy, I decided that I really wanted to go ahead and keep the needle look on this and keep it analog style gauges. I like the way that they look, and they give it a more period correct vibe. So I'm really pleased with this. The chrome face on the red and black looks good, and I was able to save a bunch of money by not having to buy a pre-made cluster for a square body. So I'm pretty excited about that. Unfortunately, these gauges have to stay for now. Now, they are hooked to the old chunky 350, and they work. So I don't see any point in going ahead and removing those just yet, since none of these gauges are hooked up. So later on, when I hook those up to the big Cadillac motor, that'll be something else, and we'll go ahead and pull these out. But for now, they work, and I just dropped them on top of the dash. So they get to ride for a little bit longer. I did also get around to buying a new glove box, and I went ahead and replaced it. So now, no more glove box door falling off, and it closes properly. So I'm pretty excited about that part too. Now, as we pan around the truck, starting to get a really good feel for how I want it to feel inside. But we still have a few more things that we need to do. Now I think the next big hurdle is we need to do something about these seats. They look horrible. Now I know at least one of these seats actually goes in the truck, but the other one I think might be out of an F-150. Now I know that I can get a new vinyl kit and I can recover the seat that actually belongs in the truck, and the pleats actually match with the doors, so I think that's what I'm going to do for what became my rear seat. But I might need to work with a local upholstery shop to get the F-150 front seat redone to match the rear. we'll deal with that a little bit more later. Now once I have stuff on order and I'm waiting on things to ship so I can work on the seats, I think I could go ahead and start trying to make this thing fit. I bought this cab wing a while back, and while it is the one for this truck, it fits horribly. So it's going to take some fiberglass reworking to make this thing fit the truck correctly. And I think you'll see that later on our next episode. But for now, that's your update. Go ahead and leave a comment if you guys want to see something more in depth, or if you want me to cover something a little bit more thoroughly. But just wanted to go ahead and show you guys what I've been up to since the last video. For now, wackadoo out.